If you're a founder, there's this feeling of dread you can get when you look at the numbers and they're just not working. But what if that feeling wasn't about failure? What if it was a signal that you're on the verge of a breakthrough? Today, we're diving into the Founder's Playbook to master the strategic pivot, and we're going to show you how to turn it from a scary last resort into your most powerful, data-driven superpower.
All right, let's jump right in. Here's our game plan. First, we'll nail down what a pivot actually is. Then, we'll get into the critical signals your business sends when it's time for a change. We'll look at the different kinds of pivots you can make, walk through exactly how to pull one off, and then we'll look at some absolute legends, companies that were built on the back of one single brilliant pivot.
So first things first, let's get our terms straight. The word pivot gets thrown around all the time in the startup world, right? But it's so much more than a buzzword. Honestly, it's a fundamental skill you need to survive and, more importantly, to win.
This quote from Eric Ries, the guy who wrote The Lean Startup, just nails it. A pivot isn't waving the white flag. It's the opposite. It's having the courage to act on what the market is telling you. It's learning out in the real world and then doing something about it.
Okay, and this distinction is absolutely crucial. An iteration is a small tweak. You change a button color, you rewrite a headline on your website, you're just fine-tuning the engine. A pivot, on the other hand, is a major change of direction. You're not just tuning the engine anymore. You're deciding to drive to a completely different city, like switching from selling to consumers to selling to businesses. Big difference.
So the big question is, how do you know when it's time to change course? Well, the good news is your data is already telling you. You just have to know how to listen. Let's dig into the key signals you need to be watching like a hawk.
And let me be really clear on this. The best pivots, the ones that lead to massive success, are not born from a late-night panic attack or some vague gut feeling. They are methodical, calculated decisions that are driven by cold, hard numbers. The truth is in your data.
First up, and maybe the most important signal of all, is low retention. I want you to picture your product as a bucket. If you're constantly pouring new users in the top, but more than 60% of them have leaked out by the following week, you've got a leaky bucket. That number, less than 40% of users coming back each week, is a huge red flag. It tells you your product isn't sticky, it's not a habit, and no amount of marketing can fix that.
Signal number 2 is your Net Promoter Score, your NPS. This is basically a direct measurement of how much your customers love you. And a score under 30, that should give you chills. It means you don't just have indifferent users, you have more detractors, people who are actively unhappy, than you have promoters who love you. And detractors don't just leave quietly. They tell their friends to stay away. That's a fire you have to put out.
And our third signal is just the brutal math of your business, your LTV to CAC ratio. It's the total value a customer brings you over their lifetime versus what it costs you to get them in the door. If that ratio is less than 3, your business model is broken. It means you're spending $1 to maybe make $2 back over years. That's not a business. As they say, that's a very expensive hobby.
Okay, so the data is practically screaming at you that something needs to change. What are your options? Well, a pivot isn't just one thing. Think of it like a menu of strategic choices. There are a bunch of different types, but let's break down 3 of the most powerful moves in your playbook.
First up, the customer segment pivot. This is that classic right product, wrong person problem. You built something amazing, but you're selling it to an audience that only kinda cares. The move here is to find the people who feel the pain you're solving so deeply that your product becomes a must-have for them.
And look at how this plays out. This is so interesting. For a young professional, meal planning is a convenience, a nice-to-have. But for a parent, getting healthy meals on the table for their kids is an urgent, emotional, hair-on-fire problem. See that? Same product, but for the new segment, it has 10 times the impact.
All right, now let's flip that. The value proposition pivot. This is when you found the right customer and you understand their problem perfectly, but your solution just isn't cutting it. It's not powerful enough, it's not magical enough, and that's why they're not sticking around.
This example shows it perfectly. A manual drag-and-drop planner is still work for the user, but a one-click AI planner that does all the work for them? That's magic! You're shifting from being a tool they have to use to a service that delivers a perfect outcome. That's what gets you that high retention.
The zoom-in pivot. This one is all about paying incredibly close attention to user behavior. You might build this huge, complex product with 10 different features, but you look at the data and you realize 90% of your users only love and use one of them. The pivot here takes courage. You cut the other 9 features and bet the entire company on the one thing that people truly love. This is such a great example of that radical focus. The first product was bloated. It was trying to be everything. But the data was crystal clear. The shopping list feature was the killer app hidden inside. By zooming in, they cut out all the noise and created a super focused, high-value product that's way easier to explain, market, and improve.
Okay, knowing why you need to pivot and what kind of pivot to make, that's a huge part of the battle. But executing it without chaos is what separates the winners from the rest. So let's walk through the actual 5-step playbook for a structured, successful pivot.
Following a process like this turns a scary, emotional moment into a clear, scientific one. It starts with the signals in your data. Then you diagnose the real problem. Which of your core beliefs about the market was wrong? You match that to a pivot type. Then, and this is key, you create a new testable hypothesis. Not a vague idea, but something specific like, we believe parents will pay X for a feature that does Y. Then you run a fast, small experiment to test it, like 2 to 4 weeks max. And only when the data from that experiment confirms your new hypothesis, only then do you commit and reorient the whole company.
So the whole game here is discipline. Use data, pivot before you're about to run out of money, test one thing at a time. Now this fourth point, honestly, this is what separates the pros from the amateurs. You have to record your decisions and what you learn from them. Your brain is not a reliable hard drive. Using a dedicated tool like FounderScope here is a total game changer. It's literally built to create this strategic record, this log of your evolution. It turns these chaotic moments into a library of insights, making that knowledge a permanent asset for your company. And finally, when you make the call, you have to communicate the new vision with absolute clarity to your entire team.
So if there's still a tiny part of you that thinks a pivot is a sign of weakness, let's just destroy that idea for good. We're going to look at some of the most famous companies in the world. Companies that would not exist today if they hadn't had the courage to make a massive, strategic pivot. Before there was Instagram, there was an app called Bourbon. It was this complicated check-in app with gaming elements and photos. Nobody really got it, and it wasn't growing. But the founders noticed one thing. People loved playing with the photo filters. So they did a classic zoom-in pivot. They threw everything else away, focused only on simple, beautiful photos, and became Instagram. The rest is billion-dollar history.
The story of Slack is just incredible. The team was trying to build a video game called Glitch, and, well, it failed. But to build the game, their remote team had created this amazing internal chat tool to help them work together. They realized the tool they built to build the thing was way more valuable than the thing itself. That tool became Slack, which sold for almost $28 billion. That's a pivot.
Let this one really sink in for a minute. Blindly pushing forward with an idea that nobody wants isn't heroic. It's a waste of your time, your money, and your team's talent. A pivot isn't about running away from failure. It's about having the courage to run towards success that actually matters.
And really, that's what this all comes down to. Your analytics, your user interviews, your retention charts, they're telling you a story every single day. The signals are there, the playbook we just walked through gives you the map, so the only question left is, are you ready to listen to that story and write a much, much better ending?